Today on Parts Hold, we are going to talk about what I would call a pretty contested topic in leadership and definitely something that you see in parts departments. And it's a burning question. We're going to answer whether or not we can be friends with our employees. Can parts managers be friends with their employees? We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about Cliff and his frightening vacation idea that may ruin essentially every social relationship he has, and much, much more coming up today on Parts Hold.
Here to fill the order.
Okay, so we're coming up at an exciting time in Cliff's life, which, we talked about this on a previous episode, which is rapidly coming to an end. But what do you got planned in the next coming weeks?
Well, I figured if I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out with the bang. And so we've booked a cruise, 6-day cruise or 7-day cruise. I can't remember which one it is, but yeah. We've done multiple cruises in our lifetime. However, I can tell you for sure, I've never done it during hurricane season.
Okay, so you're going to get on a death ship during hurricane season in the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Where you're headed? The Bermuda Triangle?
Just south of that.
It's funny that it's close, though.
Yeah, we're going to the Bahamas, and I think there's a couple stops in the Caribbean. It's something we've had as a family. We had booked for a really, really long time, and then through COVID, obviously they canceled a lot of that. And now that they've opened that travel back up fully and completely, entirely, we needed to go ahead and book and use our travel credit. And so we're taking some friends along with us.
So how well do you know these friends?
Pretty good. We've been friends for a while. However, when you're locked on a ship, friendship could change. So that's a little bit.
Yeah, I think you learn stuff about people whether you want to or not when you're trapped on a death boat.
Yeah, and I feel like, I would agree with you. However, I do feel like if we were staying in a house together, it's a little bit different because in this case, we're going to a port and we don't have to do the same activities that they do.
Well, there's also these ships are big enough that you could probably be separated from each other if you wanted to. Like, isn't there multiple pools, multiple bars, everything like that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, they're plenty big enough. I guess maybe one of the things that I've never thought about, but it's happened to many people, is falling overboard. But yeah, with the storm coming, if the boat's rocking, stay inside.
Yeah, that would be terribly ironic if you fell off of a cruise ship and your son had to come and save you from the Coast Guard. Like, literally, I could just see the look of disappointment on his face as he pulls you out of the water. So that's interesting.
Actually shaking his head.
Yep. All right. So you know what I would do in this situation is I would establish boundaries and permissions with the other couple. Like there'd be a meeting before the trip. I'm sure you can completely see me doing this, by the way.
No, for sure. I can actually hear you in the way you're stating it. So one of the couples lives right around the corner from us. And
good gravy. There's multiple couples. This isn't going to get awkward at all. I can't wait to hear the follow-up on this after the trip's done.
It's going to be fantastic. But we hang out a lot. And so I feel like with them, we go to dinner and hang out at the house together a lot, hang out at the pool, whatever. With them, I think it's going to be okay, and we can have that. We have that relationship. Like it's enough. Like I've had enough. I'm ready for a break. Time out. With the other couple, we probably haven't hung around with them quite that much. So it's a little bit tricky. And then you throw in the allure of alcohol. So it can be super fascinating by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will be. So I look at this is there's like 4 outcomes, right? So the Honeycutt family could be by themselves. The Honeycutt family could be with couple A. The Honeycutt family could be with couple B, or it could be a group activity where everyone's all together. Now we've got a 6-day cruise. So what I would say is I would schedule one of those things. It's ridiculous that I think this kind of stuff. But I would schedule one of those things throughout the whole 6 so that essentially all 4 things for sure are going to happen. So the 4 things are scheduled, and then the rest would be kind of a play it by ear, but at no time are there any expectations that any one person has to hang out with any of the other people. If it happens organically, if there's a port drop and then you guys end up all together, that's fine. But if it's not on the schedule of the 4 things, then there's just no expectations. Because I think what happens in a lot of cases, people go on these vacations and one couple expects that everyone's going to hang out together. Another couple expects you might have a dinner together, but it's not that big a deal. And then finally there's there's a couple that's like, I'm going on the same boat with you, but I am totally okay if I never see you.
Yeah.
So not establishing that prior to launch is the problem. If you navigate it the way that I tell you, everything will work out.
It's funny because all those conversations. So we booked this back, way back, actually right around the Super Bowl, is when we booked this.
Okay.
And that's the conversation we had. Like, hey, listen, you guys may want to go snorkeling, but we may want to go to town. We may want to go on a taxi tour or whatever. So we all had that conversation. So they originally talked about wanting to book some of the excursions in advance, and I suggested no because of that. Like I was like, hey, let's not do that, because let's just see how it goes, and then see what we get there and what we determine and what we want, because it may be something that it's you may want to go swim with the dolphins, but I want to go swim with the pigs.
Yeah, so I'm already optimistic that this thing's going to be a success.
Yeah, well, we'll see. And, one of the things that happens is sometimes you go on a vacation with friends and you come back not friends.
Yep, that's very true. And just in case you guys thought he was kidding, there actually is a place in the Virgin Islands that you can swim with pigs.
Yep, 100%.
Are you surprised that I knew that or no?
No. I'm not surprised. Now, Watts, or Coach Watts.
Coach Watts, smartest person. I think he's the most intelligent person I know. And I've known some pretty smart people.
If you're a client out there and you have Coach Watts as your coach, I would suggest to you to get involved in Jeopardy and use Coach Watts, because he's going to win.
I hope he tries out, because he's just so intelligent.
It's unreal.
I would give him the time off to film. He could stay here at the office while he films.
Oh, Watts, if you're hearing this, try out for Jeopardy.
Exactly. All right. So yet again, what a perfect segue into our conversation today. So this is pretty contested. I'm curious to see how everybody responds in the comments, because I think that there are at least 3, Cliff, maybe 4 schools of thought on this topic. And we're going to talk about, for our parts managers, can you be friends with your employees?
So let me ask you this before we go any further.
Mm-hmm. I'm ready.
Have you done both?
I've done both, and I've done both well and done both poorly. So I have a huge body of work for us to talk about.
That's great. Because I agree that I have done both, been both, and have been successful. And I've also done very cool.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about right now, at this moment in time, what are your thoughts on whether or not parts managers can be friends with their employees?
Yes, they can.
Okay. So I agree. I also feel like they can be.
That's the first time in show history that you and I have agreed on a debated topic. And it's not really debated. We're not debating, but.
No, but this was, it was very clear that I think we both, it sounds like we probably had similar experiences in our successes and failures, and that we both feel like it's the right thing to do. That probably comes all the way down from Chris. because Chris, one of my favorite things that he says is that he'll never hire somebody that he doesn't like. So that plays into it from really early on, is that there's got to be a personal connection there for him. And he runs a really, really successful business. And I think there's so many, he's our mentor. We look up to him, but we definitely also consider him our friend. And I think that how I've felt about this has gone back and forth, but probably over the last 5 years of working with Chris is that I've been very straightforward, and I think that it's super possible and also ideal, I think, at the end of the day. So I was going to just kind of share a story that it's from the service side, but keep in mind it's leadership at the same time, right? So I went from being a service advisor to being a service manager. And my initial thought, and I think this was probably in hindsight a protection mechanism, and the reason I'm telling this story is because parts managers almost always come from the counter.
Yes.
They rarely come from another department into parts and become the manager. So this is why I was hoping this would kind of resonate. What I thought was these people that I was friends with, hung out with outside of work, had a real vested interest in themselves and their families. When I became the boss, I had to sever all their friendships. And I think it was really, really confusing for people that for years before, I worked at that place for 14 years, and it was really confusing to them that I no longer was in the friend zone. And I think what probably ended up happening, no one said this to me, but I'm just kind of suspecting, is that they thought that the friendship from before I became the manager was a lie. And it made it to where I actually had to almost build up relationships again with them after severing it on my own. But I don't know if you had that happen, but I realized really quickly that the truth of the matter is we're friends with our people. That should be much more of an advantage than a liability, because if Cliff is my friend, he's vested in my success as much as I'm vested in his. And that's the way that a healthy friendship in a department should run.
Mine's a little bit different in that when I went from counter person or system manager into the manager role, the store that I was at, there was a lot of guys that were very, very similar aged. And so we were all friends, technicians, service advisors. In fact, I'm still very good friends with a lot of those guys. That was 25 years ago. But we were all really, really close. And there was a period that we all still remained really close friends. There was a time where as those people left, I felt that the new coming in, I felt that I couldn't hold them accountable if they were my friend.
How do you feel now?
I think I can hold them accountable. I think actually I can, much to, just like you said a minute ago, they're vested in my success, and so they want to be held accountable.
Yeah, and also I think that, as an employee, when I think back to it, I would much rather have a boss that was my friend and in my corner than someone that the stranger you don't know.
Yeah, it's funny that you said I've never thought of it as a protection mechanism, but now when you said that, I was like, man, I bet that's exactly what it was a protection mechanism for me. I think because I became a manager really young, and I went through some phases there, that when those people that I'd grown up with in the business had kind of left and moved on, that me separating from that and having this, persona that I was not friends with anybody. Yeah, I think protection is probably the best way to look at that.
Yeah, because you knew that there might be a case where you might have to fire somebody that's a friend.
Yeah. Yep.
So you went completely worst case scenario. And how many friends did you have to fire?
0.
I had to fire 1. But
I've written a lot of
Yeah, so I wrote a lot of them up too. Now the funny thing is, I don't know if you had this experience. What I found was if I wrote my friends up once, it was good. And
you were very bitter initially, But normally, thinking back on it, normally they came back and we had a great conversation about the scenario.
Yeah, I think that in most cases, my friends came back and said that I was right for what I did. The one time I had to term somebody, it was a tech that actually his brother and I lived together. So like I went to family events and stuff like that, and I still to this day still friends with this guy, believe it or not. But he left a caliper loose.
Yeah, I mean,
and it was just one of those things where there was no way that I could keep him on after that, and it was just it was an incident where the caliper fell off. There was tons of damage to the car. The customer, got in an accident and stuff like that. And thank God nobody was hurt, but it was just it was a mistake. He didn't double check his work. He was super upset, and he was more upset that he knew that I had to fire him than getting fired. It kind of gives you an idea of the kind of man that he is. But I also helped him get a job after that too. So I would like to say that we worked together, and I would never, let's say that, I was back in the dealership world, I wouldn't hesitate to hire him again, because he wasn't that guy that made a lot of mistakes, but it was just one of those, like, I feel like there's unforgivables, like leaving a wheel loose, leaving a brake caliper loose, where you're putting, a lot of people in danger, that you can't keep that person on when that happens. So that was probably, he made it easier on me, because I was pretty tore up about the fact that I had to do it. But he basically said, I'm sorry that you have to do this, but I know that you do.
Yeah, it's funny. What a great lesson though that is out of that story. In thinking about my career in the dealership world, I went from everybody's buddies and we're all friends to I can't be friends with anybody, and it to a situation where I was friends. Now there was still a level of it, and the way I learned about this was an owner that I worked for that has passed away now, that we were great friends. And
I love that. So you had a really good example.
I had a great friendship with him. And the store that I worked at, we had a gym on site. And so I worked out with him every day. At 11 o'clock, we worked out. And rain, snow, sleet, or shine, we worked out.
Yeah, because there's a lot of snow in North Carolina.
Right. But he, when we walked into the gym, we were gym buddies. But when we walked out, he was boss, I was employee. Now, that doesn't mean that he didn't call and check on my son as he was playing sports, or that he didn't want to be involved in my day-to-day activities. But I think what I learned and what I took away from it is that I had a deep admiration that I was willing to go to war for him. And at the same time, I had a deep level of respect for him, that we could have hard conversations if something wasn't going right. And I also understood the separation, friendship there, let me rephrase that. Buddies there, because there is a different thing with buddies. We were
Oh, okay. Yeah, I understand that.
And we were friends in the workplace, but I also understood that there was a respect factor there. I was still the employee regardless.
Did you, because of the friendship, want him to hold you to a higher standard?
I tell you, we don't have time for the story, but there was a scenario that something happened, and I'll just say that I embarrassed him in front of his peers.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a meeting quite some distance away from the dealership, and he wanted me to drive. And so where that dealership was, we pulled right onto the main highway that was going to take us into a meeting. It was a 35-minute drive. And he blew me out the time we pulled out of the dealership until we pulled into the property where we were meeting. And then he told me at that time that the meeting had been canceled. Now turn around and drive back. And he gave it to me some more. But the thing that I learned about it was his thing was, not only did I embarrass the company, but I embarrassed him on a personal level. And that probably hurt worse.
Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, that hits a little different, doesn't it?
Yeah. And he was a little bit. he was close to my age, so he was more like a really, big brother kind of relationship to some levels. So that's where it really hurt, because I had hurt his name and drug down the name. And at the time, again, I was young, but I was a senior manager. I had been manager longer than the rest of the managers.
Yeah, and your job at that moment in time was to defend and support, and you went rogue. Okay, that's a great example. I probably have one or two of those in my career. Like I said, this is not where we're at now. Cliff and I having this conversation is from years of doing it the wrong way. So that's how we got here. But it's really kind of fun to hear you talk about it, because I feel like you say stuff and I'm like, oh, I've got a story for that. It's so interesting.
I remember, because of my deep love for the fine world of professional wrestling, we had championship belts for our advisor, for the lead advisor for the month. And so
that's a great idea, by the way.
Striving to get that championship belt. But that camaraderie couldn't have happened if there was complete separation. I really don't think, looking back on it, I don't think that they would have been vying for it, because they almost wanted, it changed for me. It went from, seeking the approval of someone else to them seeking my approval because of their friendship.
Right.
And that they didn't want to let me down. So they wanted to have that championship belt because, I'm Cliff's favorite because of this or whatever. So it's funny that does a 180-degree turn.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a great lesson. So in closing, Cliff and I share the same belief on this, that you can be friends with your employees. There might be time that emotionally it's a little more difficult to navigate, but when you choose to go the other route and you're not friends with your employees, you're missing out on a whole lot of opportunity. One, to enjoy work, and then also to build a team that's really, really endeared to you. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it's all about as leaders. The thing that we can, really hope for is that we inspire others to become the best version of themselves. And if we get along, it seems like that's a little bit easier. So that's going to do it for us today. I can't wait to see everybody next time. I'm Christian Lafferty, Clifton Honeycutt, and thank you so much for being on Parts Whole.
Here to fill the order.